Welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I'm Charles Aniegolu. Now, it's an issue that's been as sharp and as deadly as a dagger, a sort of political party film noir marked by a mood of pessimism, perhaps even fatalism. And when you consider the power and influence of the governors who oppose it, menace and political warfare, it's all about the divisions and controversy in the ruling APC party over what type of primary to adopt, in spite of attempts to smooth over ruffled feathers and the rather obvious fact that it's been passed by the National Assembly as the legal method for political parties to pick their candidates for general elections, though it is still awaiting assent from President Buhari. But put simply, direct primaries involve the participation of all party members in the selection of party candidates, which seems pretty democratic, while the indirect primary method involves the use of delegates who are usually members of the executive at the ward, local government and state levels, which seems somewhat less democratic. So what's all the fuss about then? Well, for his perspective on this, I'm joined now in the studio by the Director General of Voice of Nigeria, the country's international radio station, Osita Okechukwu, who's also a foundation member of the ruling APC party. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
I appreciate it.
I know you followed all the engagements within the APC with regard to the rancid debate over direct and indirect primaries. What's your take on the state of play on this in the APC?
No, it's not about APC per se.
Well, we're talking about APC.
Not the Electoral Act involves all the political parties.
Yeah, of course, but it's the reaction in the APC.
No, the reaction in the APC, just like in the PDP and other political parties, is divided.
Well, let's talk about the APC because that's your party.
No. Why I want to be broad in the discussion is that the Electoral Act amendment will affect
obviously everyone else. But a lot of the noise we're hearing is coming from the APC.
Naturally, it's the number one today. Controls about 20 states out of 36. So you can imagine the weight that will bind it about. So the point is actually that the good thing is that the Ninth National Assembly, they must take the kudos for having come broadly in collaborating with the executive. So far, they cannot be said to be adversarial to the executive. They support the executive board in the financial.
I don't understand what you're talking about. We're talking about direct primaries and indirect primaries. There's a big schism between the governors who represent the executive and who wanted to stay with indirect primaries and members of the National Assembly who voted for and passed a bill that incorporates direct primaries into the Electoral Act. That's the issue here. So there can't be that cooperation that you're talking about if they're at opposite ends of the scale.
No, I'm coming to the point that the National Assembly that decided both houses, both the Senate and the House of Representatives, and submitted for Mr. President for assent, is now at the doorstep of Mr. President to assent.
Yes.
Which is what I'm trying to drive at, that they debated on both sides of the direct and indirect primaries. And both sides have the advantages. Those who canvass for indirect primaries will tell you that it is more manageable. For them, it's cheaper. That if you go for the direct primaries, it means you are telling the Independent National Electoral Commission to cover about 889,000 words. And that for them, that INEC do not have such funds. They go ahead to tell you that it is the business of the political party to decide even whether to handpick or go for any primaries at all.
Yeah, but one would assume that the National Assembly's job is to make the best laws for the country, irrespective. I mean, the issue of whether it can be funded or not is another question altogether. The issue really is what's the most democratic way to select candidates in political parties. Isn't that that's what they said?
That's the debate.
Drove their
But both sides
decision.
are telling you that if you talk of democracy, you should allow the political parties to make a choice.
Yes, I've certainly heard that argument.
So it's an argument they have making. But what we're saying is that I'm one of those who are more inclined to support the direct primaries, because the advantages it has overwhelms that of the indirect primaries, kind of expands the frontiers.
So you support it? You're saying you're more inclined to support it?
Yes, I support direct primaries because it improves our electoral system.
Right.
It returns the party ownership to the membership of the parties. It also enhances the observance of social contracts between the elected and those who elected them. Because the day you know that in your ward, a ward is sometimes 2 or 3 communities or 1. If you know that you are going to depend on the membership of the political party in that ward, you are more inclined to be loyal. And even your performance when you're elected will be higher. Some of those governors who are opposed to it, they do not understand that in due course.
So you think there's a good element of accountability that comes with direct primaries?
Yes.
Right.
It has a lot of advantages. Not only that the loyalty would bestow on the people. That is going by the Abraham Lincoln's definition. Democracy for the people, by the people. It brings it closer to the people. And it also, we have noticed that in the past elections, we have not crossed electoral turnout, voters turnout of over 40%. We have not. But if the parties are involved in canvassing to who becomes a candidate, to every member of the parties, it will transcend to the electoral voter turnout. Because if you've suffered and know that you are one of those who elected Mr. A or Mr. B, the tendency for you to pay attention to how he's elected becomes huge. So
the points you're making make a lot of sense. The problem, of course, is that there is a suspicion amongst the general electorate who are not politicians and are not in the political parties that, this is not so much. Neither side is driven by the democratic imperative, that they're simply driven by their own self-interest, and that this is a battle of sorts going on between the governors and the National Assembly. And there is a sense that the governors have too much influence over the selection of candidates, and the National Assembly attempted to clip their wings, basically.
No, I'm not one of those who believe on the ego battle. Because any governor that is in charge of a state, for God's sake, should have an upper hand. Unless if he's underperforming. But if you're a performing governor, naturally there will be a synergy between you and the electorate.
So why do they oppose it then?
I think that they do not, most of them are not looking in the fullness of time. They are looking in the short term. Why do we do it now? Because at any rate...
In other words, why do we do it when I'm in office?
At any rate, one day they will be out of the office and they will see the gains if you return the power to the people, the ownership of the political parties. There's enthusiasm that if you are a senator and you come back home and you're not doing well, the people will say, okay, we're waiting for you. You are now
deselect you, basically.
Will not endorse you. It's endorsement now.
But do you believe that the National Assembly, according to some of the accusations from the governor's side, do you think they did this for their own self-interest by picking the direct primary method?
I would not fail to say, both like in economics, it's also applicable in politics. If there's any gain made by invisible hands, or unintended, what I'm looking at the broad base of Nigerian democracy, what will add value? Because don't forget that some people are losing hope on democracy across the globe. So any hope or faith, any system of method or procedure that could return the faith of the people on democracy is a welcome development, because human beings are more interested in ownership. They want to be sure that if you one way or the other offend them, they'll be in a position to punish you with their votes.
But I mean, you're a student of political science and international relations. I mean, beyond whether it's good or bad or in the interest of democracy or not, shouldn't the political parties, which is another argument, be allowed to pick the option that suits them best rather than enshrining it in law? I mean, wouldn't that be an equally democratic process?
You cannot, with a wave of hand, wave such an argument. But what we say is that 22 years down the line, when you do a comparative analysis of what paid off and what did not pay off to the Nigerian electorate, because we must talk about the people. So we are trying to place the people and the good advancement of our dear country. It should come top. Whether what favors you today in interim is direct or indirect. But what we're saying is that in the fullness of time, how would the democracy of the country?
Right, so you think it'll be of benefit to the country.
Enriched.
Right, okay. So where do things stand at the moment? The bill is awaiting President Buhari's assent. I imagine he's facing intense lobbying from all sides at the moment.
And the little I know is that he had statesmanly be consulting. He wrote INEC, the commission that is in charge of the election, the electoral power, and they consulted a lot of other stakeholders for us to look into the both sides of the divide. Because the good thing is that the main baby in the Electoral Act is intact. The most important element in that Electoral Act is the transmission of a result, the relay of the result.
But obviously you have to have the entire process be as democratic as possible.
That is it.
Right. And empower the people as much as possible.
Just like the direct primary is a booster to internal democracy of the parties, electronic transmission of results is also a vaccine.
Yeah, well, that's something that's...
To vote rigging.
Sure.
So have been proven.
Yeah, but let's stick with the issue of direct and indirect primaries. We've got about a minute and a half or so, a minute left. How much is this issue tearing the APC apart?
No, it's not tearing the APC.
I would have been astonished if you said it was tearing the APC
No, it's a comeback. The party has its own internal nexus of comeback.
Right.
At any point in time, the APC will go behind Mr. President. I hope that Mr. President will assent to the bill, and then nobody will make any noise about it.
Right. So you guys aren't tearing each other's throats
out? No. With time, they will come to understand that for the interest of the country, public interest, national interest, and national loyalty, that the frontiers of democracy have to be extended.
Okay.
Than where it is.
Please stay with us. We're going to come back and talk with you some more. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat with the Director General of Voice of Nigeria, Osita Okechukwu. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Anyegolu. Now, my current guest is Osita Okechukwu, who is a politician and foundation member of Nigeria's ruling APC party. He's also the Director General of Voice of Nigeria, the country's international radio station. Today, Mr. Okechukwu is offering his perspective on the news and talking points of the day. And one of those big talking points is, of course, Nigeria becoming the latest country to be added to Britain's travel red list, which imposes stringent coronavirus testing and quarantine restrictions on British and Irish nationals who wish to enter. Other nationals traveling from Nigeria and the 10 Southern African countries already on the list won't be allowed in. and the Director General of Voice of Nigeria, Osita Okechukwu, who, as I mentioned, is also a foundation member of the ruling APC party, is still with me in the studio. Thank you for staying with us. What's your reaction to the travel ban imposed on Nigeria by the UK?
One would say that they are very unfair, because nobody this time around could say that Nigeria did not put all they have in trying to combat the COVID-19. Nobody can fault us, even in the World Health Organization rating. So for anybody to just sit down overnight with a little spot here or the other of Omicron, it's less than kind to the country.
Yeah, but you must remember that at the outset, when COVID began, Nigeria also imposed travel bans on countries coming into, airlines coming into Nigeria, for the simple reason that nobody knew what COVID really was, and people were very afraid of it. Now you've got a variant, a mutant strain of COVID, Omicron, and can't you understand that perhaps the reaction that we're seeing is the same one that influenced Nigeria when it imposed travel bans on other countries?
By then, nobody knew the reaction.
Yeah, but this Omicron is defying vaccinations. It's defying, young people. It's attacking people. I mean, in South Africa, for example, it's gone from 300 a day 2 weeks ago to 11,500 cases today. That's pretty alarming.
My understanding is that Omicron is just like a flu.
Yeah, but we don't have all the facts yet.
No matter whichever side you come from. The point is that the Nigerian state, President Muhammadu Buhari's government, had invested heavily, demonstrated concern from the one, and up to tomorrow, is still canvassing, trying to import vaccine from whichever country in order to get more of the citizens to have the jab.
Right. So
if Nigeria was reluctant, the ban could have been accepted by some of us, but
right.
We're not reluctant.
Well, let me pick you up on that, because, you mentioned before we came on air that all this rather plays into the whole issue of vaccine hesitancy in Africa, because when there is the perception that Western countries are showing bias, it doesn't build confidence, does it? Rather, it builds doubt around those vaccines that are donated to Africa, because people feel that maybe these vaccines are being sent to kill them, because this sort of targeted travel ban reinforces the perception that there is strong bias against Africans.
That's why for some of us and the media in Nigeria, we'll keep a close touch with the COVID committee and we'll continue to do whatever we can to enlighten, continue to promote the idea of those who, by one way or the other, are hesitant. That is death on your doorstep. The vaccine is the only bridge, and even mask is the simplest. We keep on telling them that keep on your mask, because you don't know who's carrying it. So if all these efforts are being made, and some people are prepared, at the end of the year they are going back to England, either to spend Christmas or to join their families. And I understand as well that over 10 countries in Europe, there are traces of Omicron as well, and we've not heard any of them being smashed with a ban. So it's always good to look at both sides. Is the country sincere in their approach to combating COVID? I think Nigeria is.
So is it your sense that the move to impose a travel ban, this UK move, is political and more for political consumption than it is for public health? Is that your sense?
I'm not talking about political. I'm saying they are hasty. For a country like Nigeria that invested billions in combating COVID, if Nigeria had relaxed or behaved like Brazil initially, it could have been a different ballgame. But it's a country that put all they have daily, hourly, open centers. I think they noticed that we are serious about it.
Right.
You can only smash or get hoofed if somebody is less concerned about an issue like the COVID. But I think the Nigerian government deserves a better rating for their efforts.
Right, okay, we've got about 3 minutes or so, and I'd like to go away from the issue of COVID and get a word from you about the work that you do. I mean, the Voice of Nigeria is the international radio station for this country. You're the Director General. Tell us more about what you actually do there.
We continue, just like we talked in the COVID, trying to advance the good works going on in Nigeria and neighboring countries. Because back over there abroad, a lot of people have some misrepresentation or misconception about the country. So we continue to tell the good stories of what is going on in the country. And luckily for us, we are now digitalized as well. So those time zones where the transition radio or shortwave radio is no more in place, we meet them in all the platforms, you know.
Right. So is it the good things going on in Nigeria that you report about, or is it government propaganda that you report about?
No, we're not doing government propaganda. There are good industries sprouting up. There are some inventions and startup companies. They will report the government at any rate, but the government is not all that we talk about. So we do not add, we do not subtract. We are today the reference point. When a foreigner goes through the social media and the rest, a platform, most of the feedback we have is from those who are happy that what they read from us or what they heard from us was actually what made up their opinion. Because we do not add, we do not subtract. We tell the story the way it is, as it concerns Africa and Nigeria.
Right, and do you tell stories about corruption and mismanagement and bad governance and all the rest of it, or you just pick the bits that you think
No, we do not cherry pick.
portray the country
No, we do not cherry pick.
in a sort of positive light?
What we cannot do is to report gossip or speculation. But if there's a matter going on in the court that concerns Mr. A or Mr. B, we report it accordingly.
And a word from you about your background and your interest particularly in politics. I mean, you studied political science, international relations. What led you down that particular path? We've got about a minute, I'm afraid.
Both in primary school, I demonstrated some activism. In secondary school, the same thing. In the university, the same thing. And by 78, when we returned to the Second Republic, I joined the people
Democratic?
No, PRP.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, People's Redemption
Party.
And of course, the rest is history from there.
Yes.
I hate to interrupt you, but you must come back and talk with us again, because I particularly like that side of you, that people would get to know who you are, where you come from, who you are today, and how you got there. Osita, I want to thank you very much indeed. Osita Okechukwu is the Director General of Voice of Nigeria. That's it for this edition of the Arise interview. Join us again tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja and around the world, bye-bye, and thank you for watching.